But we don't spend a lot of time on what to do. We spend our time on who you're being. Are you aware the way you're relating to things and its impact on your client, its impact on your ability to see possibility? One of the prime feedbacks we got is that one of the things we teach is that possibility always presents itself. New possibility always shows up like a threat. When you first see it, it looks like a threat because it's calling you out of what you're comfortable with. We want to work with people to be able to calibrate their reactions and learn what they're telling them. We go into survival quite quickly. And if I can catch that signal, I can see, is this something I ought to be afraid of, or is this a new possibility?
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Okay, we're obviously recording on the second day. We got hit with the typhoon and we have to pick off from last time. But one of the things we were last talking about were your crazy engagements with like SpaceX, Hyperloop, and all that as well.
That's right.
And so one of the things I'm really curious about is like, okay, people are finding out about your services and all that. Kind of curious, what does an coaching engagement look like? Is it one-on-one? You mentioned a little bit about it earlier, but would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, coaching is part of a larger offering. Usually we do strategic implementations. People have some kind of new program, or they want to make a change, or needs to be a reorientation with the leadership team, and there's a strategic offering, some kind of plan. We'll come in and work with them to make sure it goes well. In that process, we basically consult, which is business strategy, etc. And then we coach. We coach the executives that are going to be, that they'll line out a certain exec. We usually do we have a very sophisticated way of doing a culture report, and the coaching usually lines up with what they want to accomplish and what way of being it's going to take, what ways of relating does the team really need to open up? What kinds of conversations need to be had that aren't being had, that would begin to align the team or synergize the talent at the table. And then from there might be some training elements, but those are all determined based on after we scope a team. Rarely do I just take on coaching clients, although I have one just came on who's an executive who wanted me to coach them before they brought me into the team. They wanted me to coach them to prepare the team because he felt like there were some gaps that he needed to clean up and clear up before he brought somebody else in. He thought there'd be too much resistance, and he's right. I think he was right. So if that answers your question, that's really,
Yeah.
So mainly we're focused on strategic implementations of some sort.
And like, this sounds like quite extensive work. And so
Yeah,
you kind of handling?
I have a deep bench. So what we'll do is we'll put 3 executives. I have a very specific expertise, which happens to be coaching, culture development, conflict resolution, negotiation, mediation, that kind of thing. I have a partner who is really good at, he took a business from $30 million market cap to $10.6 billion in 5 years. And he was the number 2, and then eventually the number 1, the CEO in that company. And so he is very in depth at scaling, and I'm very adept at integrating the plans that we have. He's also great at governance and finance. I think together we've raised over $1 billion for different companies. So we'll fill in where they need or work with them. I have another client. We have a number of partners that are good at different things that we'll plug in depending on what's wanted and needed.
How did you find your partners? Did you just like stumble upon them, or like?
I felt like we connected with Hendry. He was on your podcast. I connect with him. We have a public leadership training called the Revenant Process, and we have a public leadership academy called the Intrepid Academy for Effective Leadership, which carries with it a coaching certificate in the particular approach that we use. And so It's in one of those two public. And public, by what I mean is people will send their friends, their family, executives who will send their family. Almost every time we go into a company, they'll go, "Hey man, can I get my wife involved or my husband? My older kids would love this. Do you have something that like that?" And we offer these two leadership trainings. One's a 4-day intensive, the Revenant Process. The other one is the Intrepid, which is a 60-day leadership program where we coach people, coaching their people and working with them on what it means to lead something into being, how to create agreement and alignment and collaboration with the team at a deeper level than they're normally used to, which is our specialty. So that's how I find, that's how we usually get connected. Like I said, I got into ESPN because their VP in charge of HR had come through one of the Revenant. It was called something different then, but immediately she said, "I'd like you to come on board." And she sent me the next RFP, and I won this contract to restructure their finance department back in the early 90s, mid 90s. And it went really well. And then they kept me on, and I was there for 8 years, and they introduced me to Disney, and it just went from there. I was at Disney for 6, 7 years, like that.
You know what strikes me? I was at a mastermind not that long ago, probably like a year ago. And one of the people at the mastermind, there's a bunch of coaches, but one of the people said, like, "Kevin, you actually don't have to be the best in your industry. A lot of times, a lot of the wins actually is just like sticking through it." And what I'm really fascinated about your story is that you really stuck with this coaching, and you didn't really, it's not like you were like, "Oh, I'm going to do e-commerce" or anything like that and switch business models altogether. You really stuck with coaching. And it's really interesting to see the compound effect of your coaching business over the years.
Yeah,
That's so interesting.
It's a big issue. It's a big, there's momentum. The thing is, we find that we can deepen our relationship with clients when we have a breakdown. If there's a breakdown with a client, we want to get closer. And that's what we work with in our leadership program, is that you want to, the obstacle is the way. We've heard that, Ryan Holiday wrote that book, but I've been reading, the Stoics for years. And when something breaks down, the natural thrownness where people get thrown is to defend or blame, shame, credit, that kind of thing. And instead, we get curious and say, "I wonder, what is it we need to learn here? What's wanted and needed? Can we provide it? If we can't provide it, can we help the client find it?" And by doing that, we create a deeper sense of trust because we didn't blame them. We're not blaming ourselves. We're not shaming ourselves. We want to learn from the breakdown. And we have a very specific model, a way of breaking a breakdown down that will open up possibility.
This prompted a question, and I wrote it down with my really bad doctor handwriting. But, your approach to coaching, like, what do you feel like, if anything, do you feel like your approach to coaching is different than how majority of the coaching industry, like, coaches, I guess?
I know that we are distinct because I've had multiple people come through our programs who have, gotten different certifications, and they say, "Wow, this is so distinct from what we've learned." It includes what we've learned in these other projects, but we don't spend a lot of time on what to do. We spend our time on who you're being. Are you aware of the way you're relating to things and its impact on your client and its impact on your ability to see possibility? One of the prime feedbacks we got is that one of the things we teach is that possibility always presents itself. New possibility always shows up like a threat. When you first see it, it looks like a threat because it's calling you out of what you're comfortable with. So we want to work with people to be able to calibrate their reactions and learn what they're telling them. We go into survival quite quickly. And if I can catch that signal, I can see, is this something I ought to be afraid of, or is this a new possibility? And there's a way to vet that and to inquire. You have to get curious. Harvard did a study. I think the book's called Thank You for the Feedback, something like that. It's been years since I read it, but they did a 10-year study about what feedback should we listen to. And what they came up with is, well, you have to listen to the feedback before you know you ought to listen to it. You have to listen to it in the context of your commitment. And it's so easy to get, like, somebody could give me a very valuable piece of feedback, but in a very punitive tone. And I'll find myself getting defensive, but I can feel the defense and not shut my listening down. And it just happened with my son last night. We're partners in a tech company, and he was talking about he's going to put some more money into the company by, through sweat equity, because we've got some things we got to handle. And I got upset with him because he wanted stock for it. And when I listened, I got really upset, like enough that he could pick it up. He goes, "What are you getting so upset about?" And as he told me what he was thinking, the thinking made sense. So while I'm defensive, I'm still listening, right? That's one of the things I've found to be valuable. So I shut up and just listened, and I said, "You're right. Your logic makes sense. Please forgive me. I imagined something else. Something from our past kind of polluted my listening. Please forgive me." And he got no problem right off it, and we're on to what we were doing. And he was actually more open.
I think that's so interesting because something that I've been trying to work on myself is like this. Some people call it being an observer, but almost like this neutrality, like trying to be very intentionally neutral, even though we all have biases and stuff like that too. But it's one of the hardest skills that I had to like learn about emotional regulation. Yeah.
Well, it's so true, because there's no such thing when people talk about neutral listening. What that really means, it's like there's no bowl. There's a bowl there, but there's something in the bowl. If I'm aware of what's in the bowl, then I can actually listen past it. I can listen for what you're talking about, what you're saying, versus just my agenda or how I'm filtering what you're saying. I make this little dialogue where two people are talking, and we can actually we can process up to 450 words a minute, but we only usually speak around 100 to 125. That's fast. That's a lot. Usually it's less than that. So all that other RAM is going into 3 other conversations. It's going into, do I like this conversation? Is it relevant? Can I use it? It's going into, how am I doing in this conversation? Do I look good? Do I feel good? Am I trusting? It goes into, how do I think of you? Do I like this guy? Do I not like him? Do I feel he's economy? Do I feel he's trustworthy? Is it something worth listening? Is he worth getting to know? All those conversations go on at the same time. So if I'm aware of them, I don't have to. It's kind of like in the movie A Beautiful Life with Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, and he was schizophrenic. He was aware of the 3 people that weren't real, and he was able to recover by not trying to get rid of them, but just not giving them power, just being aware of them being there. And we all have that going on. And if we can that's why we talk about managing yourself first, understanding your own machinery, and then being able to listen past it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I noticed this journey because like part of me doesn't want to be biased. Like, the ideal self doesn't want to be biased. It wants to be neutral. It wants to be like, the go-to person where I make unbiased decisions, right? But then I'm human too, right? I got emotions. I'm like, some things trigger my survival state, kick up the sympathetic nervous system, fight, freeze. And what I realized,
fight,
like,
flight,
kind of
follow,
like
and freeze. Those are the 5.
I didn't know about the other 2. That's interesting. That's interesting. But what I was saying was like, I think the biggest thing it's kind of like that shadow work that we were talking about yesterday, where it's like, rather than fighting this, just accepting it. Like, hey, I'm noticing myself getting really angry in this situation. And it's just having that accusation audit, as Chris Voss says in his book, Never Split the Difference.
So good, man. So good. One of my favorites.
It's a game changer.
His definition of empathy is profound. He's really good.
One of my favorite books. Which also leads me to this like other point too, right? Like, you clearly have this process, and I'm sure it didn't happen overnight. It's not like you woke up on day 1 coaching, you're like, okay, we're doing this strategic implementation, right? Can you tell me a little bit about the evolution of your process and how you kind of like discovered it over time?
Yeah, I went to work for a company called LifeSpring back in 1981. I did their trainings in 1979, and I was 23 when I went to work for them as a trainer, and I started there, and I got involved in the marketing side, where I worked with executives who would come through the trainings and they wanted to enroll their friends. And then I worked with them on how to effectively make a difference with them, whether they enrolled or not, how to stand in the possibility of what they're committed to, and then offer them something that could be valuable. In that process, I got to learn a lot of what worked and what didn't work, what was missing for me. I was constantly in the process of connecting with my impact, managing my impact on them, and getting them to talk to me about that impact in a way that I could have it be useful for connecting to them. I remember I had this one lady, she was a nun and had gone into business, and she had a pretty high level of integrity, but to the point where she'd moralize everything, which was unnecessary. And I'll never forget that. It took me almost 2-3 weeks to have that conversation effectively. Every time I approached it, she'd hang up on me. And so I remember I started the third call where I broke through. I said, look, give me feedback. What makes you want to hang up on me? What do I do that make you say, you know what, whatever you make up about it, it turns you off. I want to know so I don't get that in the way. And she said, well, you're just so certain. You think you know everything, which I've heard my wife say, so it was not something. And I remember thinking to myself, right on. And then I asked her, I said, well, how? She goes, I know you have something to say and I wouldn't be this upset, but it's hard for me to engage it because it's not like you're wondering. It's like you're telling me. And I thought, okay, good. So now I just kept asking questions and I inquired my way deep into the conversation, and she got what I had to say with no resistance. But I'll never forget that process, because at first my mind said, oh, you're full of shit. You're just trying to avoid the conversation. And I had all this bravado come up. But instead of engaging that, I let that go and just kept following her coaching and just asked her questions. And it really made a difference. I turned a lot of what I wanted to say as statements into questions that I could learn about how much of that was true of my statement, how much wasn't, where could I deepen it with her rather than be right about it. There's a underlying need to be right. The saying, have you heard this saying? The instructions of the box that life comes in is in the outside of the box. And the box, I discovered, is looking good, feeling good, being right, and being in control. And that the instructions to break out of the box are on the outside of that. So, and that was the experience that really drove that saying home to me.
You know what's really interesting? Like, you mentioned something like what's not being said. And this actually stuck out to me from my interview with Andre too, right? You guys both said the same thing, right? And so how do you kind of create a safe environment where you can talk about these things? Because sure, it's uncomfortable, but I'm sure that there's ways to make
there's
environments safer.
Whenever I start a training or a coaching relationship, what I do is I ask them to be open to what I have to say. They don't have to believe it. What I'm inviting them to do is use what I say to them as a platform to look out from. And then if they find themselves getting upset or defensive or shutting down, let me know. And let's talk about what's there. Let's talk about what's blocking or intervening. What's the static about? The other thing is there are 4 basic principles that I'm operating from. The first one is that people never make a stupid decision. They always make the best decision they see available to them. In other words, you don't get up in the morning and go, I'm going to make the second or third best decision I see in my life. No, you're always making biologically the best decision you see possible. Now, that doesn't mean it's the best decision available. It's the one you see possible. So if you look up and you see somebody doing something that you see is really hurtful based on in the context of what they want to have happen, you got to remember that something they're seeing makes sense, that's the best choice. And that leads to the second principle, which is people always act congruently with the way the world occurs to them. So something in that action is congruent with the way. I wonder what makes that the best choice. That's the question I ask. Like, why would they choose that given these other options? They must not see those other options. In fact, those other options might be a threat. I wonder what way of seeing the world in this situation would make that the best choice, and these other choices not available, blind to, or feeling like they're threats. And the third principle is the world occurs for people in language. Now, this is a real, like you said when we got on about language. I used the word, you said, yeah, we could connect over it. Language is the software of being, or as Martin Heidegger says, language is the house of being. And being uses language to become something. So if somebody's saying something, there's usually patterns in the way we talk. So what I do is I listen for some very specific things. First off, I listen for, what are you committed to? So I have a context. What is it this person wants to get done? Who do they want to become? What do they want to see happen? Now that gives me a context to live in it, to listen through. Then I listen for patterns in that context. How do they position themselves? Do they position themselves as open? Do they position themselves as the hero? Do they position themselves as a victim? Do they position themselves as a villain? How do they interchange in those predicates? And that patterning helps me notice what they emphasize and what they omit. And what they emphasize is what they want me to see. What they omit is what they don't want to see and they don't want me to see. So if I want to that gives me an idea of what's not being said. The patterns against the emphasis gives me an idea of what's omitted. And then I can direct my inquiry into what they're omitting, which brings to the surface what they don't want to talk about. That's where transformation occurs. If they can then talk about it and see possibility in it, when people see possibility in what they don't think is possible, they get excited and they want to go again. It brings people to the surface. It brings their passion. They begin to dream again. Their creativity comes to the surface and they're ready to go again. So that's work with that in our leadership academy. We train people to listen that way. We put them on camera and we have them notice what they emphasize, what patterns are there, what they emphasize, what they omit based on the context of whatever the conversation is. And a lot of times we say, I'm committed to this, and then we act differently. Well, that's because we aren't aiming at that. We think we are, but the minute our aim changes, the hierarchy of concerns in your language changes.
Yeah.
Like if I'm really concerned about that, then there'll be a congruency in my language that leads me to whatever that commitment is. But if you say you're committed to that, but your language leads me to another horizon, that's where that delta is what I'm now going to inquire into to get them aligned, to see what's wanted and needed, to understand what's missing, and then see what's wanted and needed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And are there memorable stories that come to mind of having these conversations, of talking about that delta that you're talking about, like, that come to mind?
Yes. I mean, it's most powerful ones are personal. I told you I had a pretty dark past, right? Many years ago. And my wife found out basically I was living a double life, and we had just had a baby, my son, who's now 42. And I had just come out of, I've been dealing drugs and doing crazy stuff. And ironically, during that period, I'm reading, like I always do, reading the stuff I'm talking about here. And at one point I asked her to forgive me, and I talked to her about what's going on, and she immediately gets curious and wants to understand what I'm talking about. Like, who are the women I went out with? What have I been doing behind her back? And as she starts to get specific in the inquiry, I start getting very defensive, and I stand up and I'm full of contempt and rage, and I'm going to storm out of the room. And right as I stand up to leave, she says, "Oh, I see. So who are you confessing for? Are you using me one more time so you can feel better?" And that stopped me in my tracks. And I realized she's on it. So I turned around. It humbled me tremendously. I sat down and said, "Ask whatever you want. I'll tell you anything." And in that process, what I realized is I didn't want to see the man I had become. I felt shame, and the contempt was to drive her and myself from seeing that. And the more I faced into it, the more empathy and love I had for her, even though I knew that she may not want to stay with me. So from that time, we decided we'd sleep in separate bedrooms. She said she forgave me, but she didn't know if she wanted to stay with me. During that time, I would go to work in the morning, and my son was a young kid, so in the morning we'd talk, and then I'd come home at night and we'd play with Danny, and we wouldn't talk about the things in our marriage too deeply and, go to bed. Well, at one point I get up in the morning, I'm talking to her, and I'm asking her, I say, "Look, man, we're eating away at our nut, at our egg, because we just bought a home and I wasn't quite covering it. I'm working 80 hours, 60, 70 hours a week at the training company at LifeSpring. And, we'd get in an argument and she'd say, "Well, I want to help." And I'd say, "No, you don't." And I'd get pissed off and I'd storm out. That happened 2 days in a row. And at night we wouldn't talk about it because we would play with Danny. So the third day I come to breakfast and she's got a tape recorder on the table and she goes, look, we're missing each other. Why don't we just turn this on and talk? And I'm kind of pissy and I'm okay, go ahead. And I'm not in a good mood. She turns it on. We start talking. We get in the argument. And then before I storm out, she turns off the recorder and she says, look, let's listen to what happened. Because I'm saying, you don't want to help. And she's saying, I do want to help. And I'm saying, you're lying. And she goes, let's see what happens. So she records it back. And the recording goes like this. I'll go, you don't want to help. I can tell. She goes, no, I want to help, Danny. Dan, I just don't want to leave Danny at a babysitter's. And I said, oh, so you don't want to help. Right. So, and so I punched the tape recorder and go, okay, good. You said that, but you didn't mean it. And then she starts to cry. And I think in my mind, she's trying to con me. So I think, because I think kind of streetwise. And I think, okay, well, she wants to help. I wonder what she'd do. If she was really wanted to help, she would have thought about what she would do. So I go, okay, what would you want to do? And she reaches over, grabs her purse and pulls out a business plan, 2-page business plan for a daycare at the house. I'm staggered. I look at it. It's well thought out. I'm now convicted. Here I am storming out 2 or 3 days before this to go teach people how to listen. And I'm going through this and I'm staggered. And I realize I had projected onto her my own dark side. Like that, what I was afraid she was doing is something I would probably do at that point in my life. And I ask her to forgive me. And we some of the best conversations we've ever had started then. And for the next 2-3 weeks, we explored, and I realized in the process something, it gives me goosebumps still. I had a number of basically one-night stands, and it always would happen in September. That's one of the patterns I noticed. And we were exploring that. And it occurred to me one night in bed that it was in that month that my mother first went to the hospital for, I was like 12. And I remember saying to myself, I'll never trust women. I won't trust women. Women can't be trusted. And I realized at that moment that these flings were almost like me assuring myself that I didn't have to put all my eggs in this basket and I was still good on the market. Like there was some kind of corrupted thought of security in it. And the very thing I was doing was driving me from my family, the very thing I wanted, the scar of losing my family. Well, I was trying to protect myself from ever feeling that again. And I realized if I was going to have a family, I was going to have to walk into that. I was going to have to risk being abandoned again and really early, without seeing it coming. And it really opened up a set of conversations that drew us so close that from that time on, I never did, sure I was attracted to women, but I never wanted to imagine and go through all this craziness. In fact, it's just way too much. But it was interesting because it disappeared. And I told her, I'll tell you if at any moment I find myself attracted to another woman. And it was about 3 years later, I remember we were in this church and we were asked to be in leadership and there was somebody on leadership I was attracted to. And I told her, I said, hey, I'm attracted to this gal. And she said, good. Okay, let's go talk to her and her husband. Her husband's an ex-Marine. I'm thinking, no, we don't have to do that. Immediately the attraction's gone. I'm not attracted anymore, but we sat down and talked to them, which drew us close to them. And then we ended up training them to deliver our marriage workshop and we became best friends. So those are the kinds of things that, if you can get in touch with your machinery, the idea is to integrate it, to use it, not to let it determine you, not to let it, if you will, own you. You can own it. And so, I've found that in multiple different levels. I've done that with executives, but that's a personal transformation that occurred for me that was profound and really deepened, set a foundation in our relationship that we've relied on for almost 50 years now, 40 years now. We've been together 50 years, married 40. This will be our 46th year.
That's so beautiful. Because the part that really got me was the part where you're talking about the shift in the being. You said this earlier, right? You said something about the shift in being and stuff. And in that story near the end, the part where you realize you really wanted a family, but you're pushing them away. And I could just feel the shift of that new person that you want to become.
Well, and she noticed when I was emphasizing when I got angry, I was emphasizing my feelings, not hers. And she was just inquiring into something like she could see that what I was like, and her willingness to she's always been she loves me. I know that because I don't deserve her here. If I got what I deserved, we wouldn't be together. But she made space and we found each other. We've been that way for each other. She's been through some stuff and we've been able to walk through it I would say, without really torturing each other, which is what I think destroys a relationship. Minor tortures, like even now when we get in an argument, we'll end up laughing halfway through the argument because we start to see how stupid we look. And literally, I'm not kidding you, belly laughs multiple times. And there's just something beautiful about that you can connect with the other person even in their darkness.
Something that strikes me about your work, it is so deep and profound, and inside we know that this is like really meaningful work and this is like the transformation. But then the thing I've noticed about coaches is that a lot of people struggle with like packaging this into price. It's almost like money kind of corrupts like the wholesomeness of these transformations. And so obviously you are a coaching business and obviously you don't have to give any hard numbers, but how do you think about pricing these, like your services and all that?
Well,
or any coaching engagements?
It's not money that corrupts it. It's the relationship people have to money. Okay. I have a client that I used to work with, and they wanted to learn what I do. They wanted to learn to train and consult the way we do. And so I set up a partnership with them. And in the partnership, I started to notice that they were suspecting me. And here I'm thinking I'm giving them a deal. They're feeling like I'm doing this for the money. So I actually stopped the relationship. I said, my sense is you suspect me based on this language and what you omitted here and what you're emphasizing here, and kind of opened it up. And they go, yeah, well, it seems like you're just in it for, like this is just what you're asking me to do is just another opportunity to make money. Mm-hmm. And I said to them, you know what? Best I don't work with you anymore. Why would you want to continue to work with somebody you don't trust? And I don't want to do that. And I let the relationship go. And they try to, like, oh, come on. No, this is not something that's okay with me. Not that I hold it against you. I would be compromising myself because I know internally it hurt me that you said that. I've been very straightforward with you. And I told you I was giving you a break here, and that when I offered you this, I was giving you a break. I would have charged a lot more. And I told you that how much I get daily. If I go on site, I get at least 10,000 a day, right? I'm doing it for you for 4,000 a day. And now if you want to learn this at a deeper level, I'm offering you what I would consider an incentive, but you feel like it's not. So I want you to know that I'm not interested in trying to get you over that. If that's something that keeps haunting you, you ought to go find someone you trust.
Yeah.
It's just not worth my time. And I love you. God bless you. I think you'll actually do better without me.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I could see like if you continue that conversation or that coaching engagement, it would be a relationship of resentment.
Yeah. Well, there's, it's interesting. So there's entitlement is a very dangerous mindset. And that's what I experienced was when somebody gets resentful, they feel entitled to something. Like I have something they feel entitled to. And I help, by the way, I see how I've contributed to the relationships where this occurs. Like if I make somebody a special case and I haven't really they haven't connected with the value of what I'm doing, which I felt happened with this guy and his partner, then they'll feel entitled to what they'll like, I should be getting this all the time at what the level I want it at, not the level it's like. My point is the value of this. If you can't see the value, and I told them, you'll learn this. You can learn what I'm doing over a period of time. You make enough mistakes and pick yourself up, no problem. I can save you 10 or 15 years, maybe 20.
Yeah.
And if that's not worth it to you, I understand. But I want to be, I told them, and they agreed. I mean, to their credit, I was very clear from the beginning. They just didn't like it, and they didn't like it from the beginning. And so I missed that signal, and I'm sure it was there. And in the hem-hawing around what we were doing, how long it took them to get the money, to sign the contracts, to look at the information I sent them. It took 2 months to look at some of the content I sent them. If I would have been on my game, I'd have noticed those omissions and inquired into them. So I kind of went back. Where did I miss this? Right. So the big key here, and I'll tell you, you asked what the difference is in coaches. I think one of our big differentiators is we work it on ourselves, and that makes it easier to invite people into the dance. If I can't, I'll ask somebody, tell me the last time you thought you were really right. I mean, you were on it and you discovered you were completely off. You were all wrong. You missed it completely. If they can't give me one or two examples, I know I got trouble.
Even as you said that, I was trying to search for the last few times in my mind and nothing came to mind too.
Man, I can give you,
shit.
I can list from today back. It's crazy. And a conversation I talked about with my son happened last night.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is not to no shame. Shame and credit are 180 degrees from being responsible.
Yeah.
Shame, blame, and credit are all about the past, justifying, rationalizing, etc. And what they do is they condemn me to repeat the past. If I take credit for something, make sure that's important, if somebody gives me credit, sure, I'm going to receive it. Thank you very much. But I'm not going to let it go to my identity because the next moment isn't the last moment. And shame and blame are about beating myself up as shame for what happened and what I missed, which just signifies me, which is what caused me to miss it in the first place. And then blame is blaming somebody else, which is out of my control because I can't control them. So I'm still helpless. So both ways, I end up repeating the pattern until I can just own, not blame myself or another. This is what I missed. I wonder what I can learn from that. And then I can move into the power to move. I take my power back and I now have it to use in the correction. It's a huge jump. Jung talks about this. He said, I'll tell you, there's a quote that I use. It goes like this. You will become a bearer of light forged in darkness, embodying a depth of compassion that does not confuse itself with martyrdom. Walk among others as a reminder that suffering, when faced, can become transformation. Because most people are afraid of suffering. That's what survival is about. I'm trying to avoid the suffering. And anytime I make a commitment, that commitment is usually a promise. It's outside my comfort zone. I can't predict it. I can't control it. So now I'm going to be called into a vulnerability that I'm trying with almost my whole life's about making myself invulnerable, which is an inauthentic state because the very fact that I'm human means I'm constantly vulnerable. And if I try to reduce that sense of vulnerability, then I lose the power to create. If that makes sense, it's a leap, but I can.
No, it does. It does. It makes a lot of sense, actually.
Because the necessity, right? The vulnerability to necessity calls creativity to the surface. And when people are unwilling to face the necessity, they suffer from the despair of possibility. The despair of possibility is I see something that I really long for and it's possible. But in order to get there, I have to get vulnerable. If I don't get vulnerable and I still want that possibility, all I see is I never can reach it. And so I'm constantly in despair. So then I swing back into what's called the despair of necessity, which is I'll just settle for what I can get. But then that reminds me of what I really long for. It's not what I want. Now I have the despair of necessity because I lose meaning. Possibility is what brings meaning. And if I take responsibility for the possibility, the meaning of the future exists now in the face of whatever I get to handle. That whatever I get to handle is the opportunity to presence the future. So if I resist the moment, I have no power. And I resist the moment because I'm afraid of the vulnerability I'm being called into, and that starts that whole cycle.
And then I could see the resentment coming in too,
yes.
of you. Yes. Oh man.
But resentment is the precursor to envy, right? So if you say you and I are working together, and I'm not willing to be vulnerable, and you are to what you long for, and you're out there failing your way into these big successes, but all I can see is their successes. And jealousy is, I want what you have, so I want it, but I can't seem to get it. And there's a philosopher named Helmut Schuck who talks about this dynamic. And if I long enough, jealousy can be healthy. I can model you. I can do, I model Henry over a number of different things. It works so well for me, right? But if I model you for a while and I can't make it my own, I keep going after it because I think I have to have it the way you do, then that becomes envy. And envy is Jealousy is I want what you have. Envy is I don't want you to have what you have. And the minute I make that transition into that delusion, you'll notice my language. I will undermine you. Even though I praise you, I will make sure people know something about your faults.
I see.
I'll try to keep you from having what you deserve from other people. And it ultimately results in murder of some sort, whether reputation or right down to taking someone's life. And I've done a lot of work with criminals. And if you talk to somebody who's murdered, you'll know that it stems out of envy. They don't want that person to have what they have, and they take their life.
That's a dark path. Wow.
Yeah, that's the integration of the dark side. Yeah. If I integrate my dark side, I can spot other things in people quicker, which enables me to open up a possibility for them to see what future's coming if they continue to remain loyal to that line of thought. Because thoughts have futures attached to them. And so if you can identify the thought, you can project the future that's coming. And if people can see the future that's coming, they can weigh the short-term gain for the long-term pain, and they can make a new choice.
That's so interesting.
Welcome to my craziness.
No, it's very deep. And like, I think about, I actually have a lot of these thoughts a lot of times, right? And one of the things I'm trying to get better with personally is something called, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this term, emotional granularity, where I can pinpoint these things, right? And one of the things that someone pointed out recently was like, Kevin, what you're not feeling is you're not feeling jealousy. You're actually feeling a bit of envy. I was like, I never really used that word at all or whatnot, right?
Well, and the culture tends to confuse that word. So it's envy when you don't, like if you can't rejoice in someone's victory, that's envy.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to give them the joy that people feel when, you ever see somebody win, like you watch one of those voice shows, when they win the big prize and you feel so good. You might even go into tears because they got something they dreamed of. If somebody gets what they dream of or they hope for and you get resentful, that's envy. The French word is resentment, and it connected means bitterness, which means unfulfilled revenge. You feel violated because of their victory, even though they did nothing to you. It's of the 7 deadlies. Aquinas says it's the one that makes no sense at all. That's why we hide it, because we can't see what anybody gets out of it. If I'm a glutton, you know what I get out of it. If I'm a womanizer, an adulterer, you know what I got out of it, right? Anything like that. You can see that's the one that you don't understand what they get out of it.
Let's talk about this, but in a different context, right?
Sure.
I think earlier we were talking about pricing, and something I've always like kind of wondered is like, how do I price my services, right? But how do I price it from a place where I don't feel like super bitter or resentful about it, right?
I cost $50,000 a year. And
how did you come up with that?
I figured I'm worth it. I'm worth probably more. Henry says I'm worth a lot more. $50,000 a year or $30,000 for 6 months. And, I know if you spend a year with me, you're going to get more than your money's worth. And I have clients that have gone on for 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, and come back or send people to me. I don't have any problem with that. And the ones who don't want to do that, I get it, I understand, no problem. I have other coaches that may charge less, and they're on the path. They may be very well. I turn them to them, or, I've been interviewed amongst other coaches. I tend to win 95, 96% of the time. I figured it out. But I think a lot of it is being okay with it's okay if it doesn't fit, no big deal. I did a service.
Yeah.
Because maybe what they're going after isn't worth what you're asking to them. That's why I spend a lot of time really understanding when you accomplish this, what shifts in your life. I had a young gal. This is no bullshit. She was working, she's probably making $40,000 a year. And she calls me up and she says, I want to hire you as a coach. I go, honey, okay. And I immediately go, you're in the wrong league here. How much you make a year? $40,000. But I want to double my income in the next year. Okay, good. Do you know how much I cost? She goes, yeah, I heard. I said, what makes you think you can do it? Oh, I can get the money. I'll raise it. I said, listen to me. I don't want you to raise it if you're not serious, because I don't want to take money from a young woman who wants to find a spouse, get married, have kids, and have a career on top of that. if she's not serious. So I turned her down. She sent me 3 letters, finally took her on.
Mhm.
She doubled her income the first year. She found a spouse the second year, and now she's married with 3 kids. And she writes me, we stay in touch. And I was with her for 3 years, and she was awesome. She every year renewed. And then her brother came on board. She referred her brother, and her brother referred 3 other people. In fact, her brother's referred 5 different clients. So, I believe in what I do. I love people. I know that I can stay up bothered about my clients. I'll lay up at night and think about what they're up against, and it'll bother me if I can't see new possibility. I'm doing this. That's why I only take 4 or 5 clients max, because I have my other consulting work, and my clients stay in my head. I have this one guy, just brilliant business kid. This kid's young, and his company does about 20 million a year, and he is an animal, and his wife left him, surprised him. He hired me to help him through that. Now he's got me working in his business. He's got me coming out doing an offsite with his team. He calls me all the time. I mean, this is only 7 months into the contract.
Yeah.
And that's how I know, because I charge that. They talk 2 or 3 times a month, but I'm on call if they need me more. And this guy has called a couple of times. I've talked to him 2 or 3 times a week as he's working through like his custody battle. He got what he wanted, being able to, he wants to stay supple towards her and not be bitter because she committed adultery, and he's trying to work through it. Like we're working through all that stuff. And then he's got his team, and they took his business. He's a smart guy. He took his business from 10, 20 million in 2 years. And now he wants to go to 30 million. Yeah. He's brilliant. He's very good. I have a really powerful assessment. He's the most balanced executive I think I've ever worked with. Really great exec. And very open, wants to learn, is not afraid to make a mistake, but very logical. He uses his analytical powers very well.
Right. Yeah. Do you prefer these longer term engagements, like continuous renewals, or do you prefer the novelty of new clients all the time?
I like the long term. I like to get to know people. Most of my clients go at least 3 years, but if they don't, I've had a few not, that's fine, but they come back. I've had multiple people do a year and come back and do another year. And one guy came back, did 1 year, then he skipped a year, then he came back and did 2 years or skipped a year. And he did, I think, a year after that too.
What do you feel like happens at that 3-year mark if like most of your clients?
Well, normally, at the end of a year, unless I can find a new project or we're taking a new level that they're up for, I'll let them go too. It's got to have some teeth in it. I don't want to get on the phone and just have a conversation. They're not paying for a friend. And although I like being friendly, they're paying to get results. Yeah. And I have all kinds of frameworks, and those are not as valuable they're valuable when you plug them into a way of being together that's active, that's vibrant, that's alive, that's mutual. It's not like shoulder to shoulder, not head to head or top down or shoulder to shoulder.
I'm also really curious about this because obviously you know a lot about coaching. You have all this experience and wisdom and working with so many clients, and you've been in this game for like 47 years or 43 years. I guess where do you want this coaching business to take you in the next few years, like in the next season of your life?
I never think, I'm not a big guy like that. I do this because I love it. And I love people, and I love to get to know them, and I love to get to know their families and their businesses. And so, for me, if I can continue to be in deep fellowship with my clients and discover their lives together, and my vision is to stand to see them win. And when they do, I get a great joy out of that. I love it. Like this young gal I talked about, I just love. Yeah. And you have no idea what she struggled with before. She thought she might be gay, all these things. Then I have whatever. Let's talk about what's there. And it just moved, like she moved. And to see that and to be part of that, to me, it's holy. So I told my wife, I'll work till I drop. There's no retirement. My grandfather used to say, only those who don't like their work retire. All we do is take vacations.
Yeah.
Recreation, you got to recreate.
Yeah, I feel like something happens when you just like start like retiring. Yeah, like people just like their energy shifts or something weird happens, right? When there's no sense of purpose anymore. Yeah, I feel like people die a lot quicker. Well, I've heard that study.
That's true.
Yeah,
I told my wife if I didn't do this, I'd be a chaplain, or I do something where I'm deeply involved with people. I was a chaplain for 8 years, a law enforcement chaplain. And I loved it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What was it about it that you really enjoyed?
When people, like, I'll never forget the first call I went out was one of the most powerful calls I had in my 8 years. Is these two boys were playing on this bridge, 8 and 6, and they were jumping off. They were jumping in and out of the bridge. It's in a little town called Monterio on the Russian River, and in California. And what happened is this plumber was driving in a big truck. He couldn't see them, and he hit them. And when I pulled up to be there, because I'm there to help, to basically stay with the victims or their family while the police do their work. I got there really early, and I saw the kids. They got knocked out of their tennis shoes. Were in the street, and the power of this was I helped the cop pull the one boy from under the wheel well, and the other boy, we put him on the medevac, and they took off. And then I sat with the cop to help him kind of recover. He was shaking and weeping, and just kind of was with him for a bit. He left. And I looked to the end of the bridge, and there was some man down at the end of the bridge with his head in his hands. So I walked down and talked to him, and it was the father of one of the boys. And so I got connected to him and his wife. And the idea of being just a presence there, you can't make it better. It just helped them think through. And I helped them. I know where he's being lifted to. If you want, I'll drive you there. So I drove him down to Oakland, and the boys lived, and they were fine. They didn't have any brain damage. And I haven't gotten a letter for a couple of years, but for many years afterwards, I'd get a letter thanking me on that date for being there for them. And their words were, "Thank you for the presence." It made the suffering, something that was worth it rather than destroying us. And that's really what, if you read the quote from Jung, I lost my grandson about 3 years ago, 2.5 years old. My boy's youngest boy, was crushed by a redwood. And immediately what I did is, and he called me the night it happened, and we were there the next day. We couldn't get out of Idaho. It was a big storm until the next day. And I rented an Airbnb and brought all our families together for 2 months, because I knew that the things that people do in suffering is they isolate. So we kept people in community, and it helped us process the grief and connect and mourn and celebrate Eon. That was his name. We still talk now, because the worst thing in the world is to try to put that away instead of live Eon still with us, and to be able to appreciate his life and not have to stow it away because we're afraid of the pain it brings.
Oh, that's one thing I've never understood about like my own culture sometimes. In Chinese culture, people are taught to isolate because of bad like luck and stuff like that. And
it's pretty common. Pretty common.
Yeah. It's just really, really interesting.
It's a way to pretend to be invulnerable or not feel the vulnerability of existence. It's an existential. Yeah,
it's interesting because as a recipient on that side too, like I felt like it was super, super isolating. It was actually one of the worst experiences ever.
Yeah, it's very lonely. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely, and it produces loneliness because you're the only one with your pain, and that's where we bond. Humans bond. It's interesting. You have to teach the brain to mourn. Most people don't realize that. And, having lost my mother at an early age, I learned a lot of this from the guys that helped me through particularly in my addiction when I recovered from that too, was a lot of addiction is just trauma that needs to be mourned or grieved or, to come to the surface. The minute you do that, when the amygdala lets go of it, the neocortex can put time on it. And that makes it possible to look at it. And that's where wisdom comes from. Wisdom comes from suffering neurologically.
Damn. That means like a lot of people are really suffering right now in this modern time.
God, are you kidding me?
Addictions and all that sort of stuff.
We're about to launch.
Crazy.
We're about to launch a new community for executives. I'm not quite ready yet to talk about it, but we're going to make all kinds of resources available just because of what's going on.
One thing that strikes me about you is like you clearly love the work that you do. But one interesting quote I heard, I can't remember where I heard it. It was something like everybody's fighting a battle no one else can see. And I'm kind of curious, like, what are some of the challenges that you go through with the coaching business right now too?
That's a good question. That's a great question. One of them is making sure I have time for me, to eat. I'll eat too much, or I'll stress out and, hide, or, want to withdraw, get edgy with my wife because, I'm all taken up and I don't have time for her, or I have time for her. I don't want to presence myself. I'm stingy. So I fight with that, the resentment of over like what, making sure I'm taken care of and so I can be there for my family as well as my clients. That's one of the bigger challenges through the 40 years. And because what happens is I get resentful and then I take license, like I don't drink, but I'll start drinking. I'll do things that are unhealthy, right? Because I feel like I deserve it. I've been there for them. I've done it for, and then I'll go have a couple drinks, a few drinks, smoke a joint, do anything to numb myself out because I deserve it. I call it going on vacation, but it's not a real vacation because I'm not really getting recreated. I'm just avoiding whatever would recreate me if I went into it. So I watch that. I pay attention to those. So if I start, the other day I noticed I was really angry, edgy, and I had just come back from 4 days on the river. And I was angry because I wanted to stay on the river, and it felt like imposition. And I had, it was like my entitlement was coming up. And so once I noticed that I could get off it, and then I seemed to get back in the saddle well. Like just noticing that machinery. And I made my wife pay, I was mean to her and sat down and talked to her, asked her to forgive me, did the dishes, did a bunch of stuff that I wasn't doing that I normally do, stuff like that. If I can catch it when it's small, then the consequences aren't as hairy as if I let it go. So selfishness.
As you're like talking about your struggles and stuff and the signs, it makes me wonder about the signs for myself. I think one of the things for me is just like because I'm also like that. Like I think it's so easy for me to care for others than care for myself a lot of times. And one of the signs that where I feel like I neglect myself a lot is like when I'm having early morning insomnia. That's like always a characteristic, like a prime characteristic of when I'm extending myself.
Right on. Because the cortisol stays in your system, wakes you up.
Yep. I get the 2 a.m. cortisol dump, which is insane. Which it's not really good for weight loss or anything like that either. And the stress and all that is really violent. Yeah,
so that's what I struggle with. And when I was a kid, I noticed when I was womanizing, I was just inauthentically dealing with my own stress. That was a way to do that too. So I stay on top of it. My wife is very helpful. We kind of help each other that way. We work, hey, you all right? You seem a little edgy here. What are you beating on me for? Why are you doing that? What I do is I get edgy. She gets over controlling. Like she wants to make sure everything is okay. And she's got her hands and everything. I know something's up. I'll never forget when I think
the beautiful.
No, go ahead.
Oh yes, please tell the story.
Well, when my wife's mother died, we were all very close to her, particularly my daughter. And she had died, and she was just after her funeral, after her memorial. And I was watching my daughter. I was in the living room at the kitchen, looking in the living room. My daughter was walking around, turning the TV off, turning it on, putting a record on, turning it off, and I could tell she's suffering. There's something up. I remember saying to her, she was about 8. And I said, hey, honey, why don't we go into Nani's room? Because she lived with us before she died. And let's just go in there and sit and smell her clothes. And we did it, and she started to weep, and pretty soon she fell asleep on my chest. But I could identify in her what I do when I'm avoiding pain, when I don't want to deal with the suffering that's coming. And she was so much better after that.
I love that story. And it's really interesting to see how far you come with your family. You talk about your double life back in the day and how your partnership with your wife and you've created this kind of family and stuff. It's just really, really interesting how that evolves and how we think our life is probably going to go in one direction can drastically change.
Yeah. Having a faith experience did a lot for me. I'm a C.S. Lewis freak, and I love, I'm a Christian, and I follow, I'm deeply devoted to not the dogma, but to the man. And I've encountered him in my own death. And I believe that, I've been in some really hairy situations where I was hit in a head-on car accident, died 3 times, and found peace in it. Peace by surrendering to. It's amazing how much suffering you can put up with if if you surrender into it. And that happened to me early in my life when I was first married, first year of our marriage. And it took me about 4 years before I completely got clean. But the ability to surrender into the suffering made a huge difference. I learned a lot from it. And I resist going in, but once I'm in, I'm good. I'm good once I get in. So it's just getting in.
Surrenders Surrender is such a beautiful word that you used. I love that. Kind of curious too, right? I usually play a game with people. We're coming near the end of the podcast, but I usually play a game with people
All right,
just to lighten it up a little bit.
let's do it.
You've been in the coaching business for a while, and so I'm sure you have had good investments, bad investments, and somewhere in between. This is a storytelling game, one of my favorite storytelling games. But I'm going to ask you 4 prompts about business investments because a lot of coaches, business owners in general, they invest into team members, marketing, training, a lot of different things, right? So I'm just going to prompt a phrase and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind, okay?
Okay.
Okay. First business investment you remember making.
A Lorenzo Theater.
Tell me about that.
I had bought a theater before this. That's where I met my wife. My dad really put me into that, so I didn't see it as really an investment for me. But I did. I learned. I failed. But the Lorenzo Theater, I went and got on my own after I had some transformation, some breakthrough. And it's in San Lorenzo. And and it would mean we changed film every day or every other day and classic shows and put out a poster and distributed it. But I brought my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, on as a partner. I got to know people in the community. George Thorogood used to come practice in my theater at night. I made friends with all kinds of people. And it was one of the first times where I felt like this is mine. I'm making a difference here. And my partner was a guy I grew up with. He was the best man at my wedding. We had a paper route together when I was 7, and we ended up being partners, and it worked really well. We built another theater down in Gilroy from that theater. And I met the guy who built the theater. I went to work with him selling movie theaters as cash flow and tax shelter investments. So like a whole world opened to me from just that investment. And I remember at 23 years old, I was making $250,000 a year selling movie theaters, $300,000 a year. And that started a whole new level of understanding. I didn't handle money well. I got involved in crazy shit, but I learned. But that whole thing was just a huge opening for me in my life.
Back then, that was a lot of money too.
Oh,
like
man.
a lot of money.
It almost killed me.
Yeah.
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 How I related to that money almost killed me.
Okay. Last business investment you made.
It's called Flora and Company, and it's a probiotic bar that we're producing. We bought a small business we were working with a small business called Beneficial Bakery, and it turned out they couldn't do what they said they were going to do, but we liked the vision and we went on and did it ourselves. And we got connected to Jenny of Jenny's Blended Ice Creams. We launched the product in January, and we're partners with a company called F&S Foods, who does all the pre-packaging of food for Whole Foods and Sprouts and Trader Joe's. They're a partner. We upcycle all their apple cores and watermelon nut rinds into this prebiotic bar. And this thing's doing so well. We're with the kind of problems, we're looking at a $10 million run rate by the end of this year. And it's just been fun. And I love my partners are all involved, and I get to be a part of it and own a nice piece of it. And I love Jenny, and I love the work that we're doing together. And it's meaningful. I met a lot of cool people, got to go to New York, and we launched it there and pop-up groceries. And then we had the celebration dinner at Gary V's club. His partner is my partner's girlfriend's brother. And it just was cool, kind of networking like that. It was it's like small town boy gets to go play in New York for a while. It was a blast.
These might overlap, but best business investment you made.
Best business investment. My son, and we haven't made money yet. We are on the verge. He's done something. We've got a product that it defies what AI is. AI is kind of sloppy, doesn't really work. My son's broken that barrier, and now we got to come against the skepticism. But he's actually created a digital employee that's 100% accurate, and it can do up to 30, 40, 50 step workflows. And so the way we're proving it is we're actually getting the agent. My son and his partner are going out and getting hired, and then putting the agent to work, and they can take 4 or 5 $250,000 jobs. That's how we're going to show how effective this is. And it's the most exciting investment I've ever made. We lost $40 million 15 years ago. We launched a product called The Grid, and it couldn't do everything we said it did. We needed LLMs. My son courageously in my book, came to me and said, we got to take these websites down because it could generate really nice sales sites. And he didn't want to get stuck in the technical debt. So he took down 1 million sites, took a $40 million loss. Not one lawsuit went to every investment. And we've taken those investors and put them in 10% of this new company. And I just love the creativity, and I love working with my boy and the people he's very, very, he's brilliant, and the people he surrounds himself are. And it's a real fun. It's just fun to be in that vibe. It keeps me young, but I think that's the best investment I made.
Okay. This one's a little cheeky. Worst business investment that you kind of wish you got your money back from?
Well, let's see. Worst business investment I wish I got my money back from. God. That's good. I've never wished I got my money back, but I can see that. Maybe because I'm in denial. What? The shipping company. That's right. My wife's in the background. Yes. I went into a shipping company. I was a shipbroker for a while, trading vessels. I love the work. I love the guy I worked with. I got to go to get educated in England, graduated top of my class. I ended up becoming the shipbroker for Alcoa, the plant in São Luís, Brazil. Anyway, we were killing it. And we ended up opening a series of sports stores with some of the money we were making. And this guy got really weird. He had a faith experience and got involved in a cult and went upside down. And it was just hard getting through that. He isolated himself, was willing to wreck the business because he didn't want me in it. And I was willing to get out. So I got out for nothing almost, just because I just didn't want that. It's not worth spending the time on something like that. But that's the worst one. Thanks, Eileen.
I thought your wife was going to be your best investment, but
not business investment. She's my best investment, and she is very involved in my business, but I never look at her as a business investment. Too small. She's a life. She is my life. I love her.
As you're sharing these stories, I'm sure memories are coming up for you. And I'm just really curious, how has your decision-making process changed, if it has, right? In what to invest in and what not to invest in?
My daughter was about 13. And she's given me permission to tell this story. This changed how I made decisions. I was working. I was living in Hawaii. I'd planted a church there, and I was coaching and consulting. I moved to Michigan to help a guy start a trading company, a drug trading company, a legitimate over-the-counter McKesson type deal. He was doing really well. And I helped him do that. When I remember the first year I saved him $350,000 a year because I reduced his payroll and increased production. But during that time, my daughter was going through some changes. One of the changes was she was starting to experiment with drugs and boys, etc. And I caught my long story short, my wife caught her. We had a big party for my son's friend. My son and her have mutual friends. Anyway, my son had left after dinner. His best friend's father was there. We celebrated his 50th birthday. My wife had some premonition that his son was on top of my daughter. Went upstairs. They had their clothes on, of course, that kind of thing. And very embarrassing. My wife comes down the stairs with this guy by his ear, and we very awkwardly escort them out. I go back to my daughter, and she's like, fuck you. I say, look, we got to talk. And she's just shut down, dark, won't talk to me. And I told her, okay, well, until you talk about this, I'm going to do what it takes. You're not, I'll take you to school. You come home. You don't do any socializing. I take you where you go and come back we have to have a talk. I have to understand before I bestow trust upon you again. I have to understand what's missing. And this goes on for 3 months. I take her to dance. I take her home. Finally, on the 3rd month, make the story short, I'm driving her to a dance class. It's snowing. I'm in this big SUV, and she's sitting in the chair. She was 4'11". She should have been in a child seat at 14. And I pull over and I just say to her, look, I know I'm failing as a father. I can see it. I see it in your face, your attitude toward me. I just start to weep, and I said, but I want you to know something, honey. I've never given up. I will leave my work. I will pursue you. I will be the one that raises you. I will never leave you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And I just wept. And all of a sudden, because she is cold as ice for 3 months. She leaps out of the chair, buries her head in my chest, and tells me how much she loves the way I love her. Thoroughly confused, and assures me that, and then she's feeling bad because Derek, the boy that we caught, it wasn't his fault. She started it, didn't know how to stop it. And she felt so bad for him. And so, and just wept. And then she brought me her diaries so I could see what was going on for her. You never want to read your daughter's diaries, let me tell you that. But it changed our relationship, and it made me clear about what was the most important thing in my life, which is God and then my family. And I saw God work in that moment, in that place where I was completely helpless, but I was just going to tell her, I don't know what to do, but I'm never giving up. And that was a big turning point for me and us. We're best friends. In fact, she lives next door to me with her kids. She took us on her honeymoon. She and her husband wanted to take us and her husband's parents, who are very dear friends. I mean, I told her, you improved the gene pool, honey. Good job. They live on the same property. We have they have like 500 acres right behind where we live. And my daughter's building up on the hill there, and we live next door to each other. It's great. I mean, we get along well. We see each other every day. I play with my grandkids, but that became a huge breakthrough for me. Reordered what I was really aiming at.
Such a beautiful story. Something that strikes me throughout this conversation, and we're going to start to wrap up, but actually, I want to play one last game with you, but this last segment is called Overrated, Underrated. And as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as a business owner, you've probably gotten a lot of advice. Some of it good, some of it bad. Some of it solicited, probably a lot of it unsolicited.
Yeah.
So what's the most overrated piece of advice that you've gotten so far? And what's the most underrated piece of advice?
The most overrated piece of advice I've ever gotten is best practices. It's bullshit. Go learn the best practices all you want till you can relate in a way that makes those things seem like the best option. They won't mean anything. Most underrated, I think, is mindset. Master your mindset. Master a growth mindset, a transformational mindset. And because I work with so many executives, I've heard people talk about it, but when we get into it, they don't want to pay the price to understand the way they think and the impact it has both on them and the people they work with.
Sometimes with mindset, and I think you were a little bit more specific, but sometimes when people say mindset, right? Again, it's one of those things that we know deep down inside that is very meaningful and the important stuff that we need to do. But sometimes I find that mindset means different things to everyone. And so you mentioned growth mindset, but
it means the conversation, it's the conversation you have in your head that you give credence to, the one you believe. That's your mindset. The fault where it needs work is where you are afraid to go. That's where you need to go to continue to develop it. You got to go into that cave, that dark cave, and fight the dragon you're afraid to fight. And there's ways to do that. There's ways to identify that. So that's the mindset. The mindset is that conversation in your mind that you default to, that you lean on, that you believe is going to get you through whatever you're up to.
Thank you for clarifying that. I've been trying to work on drawing the book Art of Learning. It talks about drawing smaller circles, and I've been trying to work on that, like defining things in its granularity and its smallest pieces.
I'm a nerd. I'm into etymology. What is the basis of the word? How does the culture listen to it? What part of it needs to be revised? You should look up the word promise, commitment, and request, and go get online and look those words up in the Noah Webster 1828 dictionary. Tell me what you think. Those are, and then understanding language.
What will you find?
You'll find that promise is a declaration made from one person to another that binds the person in either honor, conscience, or law to do or forbear a certain act. And it gives the right to the person who it's made to expect or claim the performance of the act, whether it's, whatever it is, to do or not do it. That's what a promise is. It binds you, and it's a transformational act. It transforms a duty, a right you have to yourself, into a duty you have to somebody else. It's the only thing that binds, except for bitterness. Bitterness is what happens when a promise gets broken and isn't reconciled. Then you're bound to that past. And that's why you recreate the same problem over and over again till you forgive. And how many times you forgive is as many times as it takes to move into the future, to get vulnerable again, like that. So if you think the word promise, commitment, and forgiveness have a common root. Promise means to send forth in the future. That's its root. Promettere, to send forth in the future. Commitment is to send with. So if I said, hey, Kevin, I'll be on your podcast next Wednesday. I'll be there if I feel like it. You probably wouldn't take that commitment or that request because what I sent with it, right? So promise, commitment, and the forgiveness is to send from. So when I'm offensed or hurt, I send myself from the offense, the need to get revenge, to send from. And they're all acts of the will. To send forth, to send with, to send from. They're all choices, acts of the will that require a mustering of the mind and the body, the senses, to bring oneself into the moment. That's at the heart of our work.
Last question for you. How can people find you and connect with you, Dan?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn or at my website. Our website is takenewground.com, and you can contact us that way, or you can contact me on LinkedIn, Dan Tocchini. I have an Instagram account too, but I don't pay much attention to it. I don't pay much attention to it. There's a lot of stuff on there, but I'm probably going to revamp all that.
Dan, this is definitely the longest podcast I've ever done, but it's one of the most interesting podcasts. And I think you're a master storyteller. I just get drawn into all your stories of vulnerability, life experiences, and all that. But all your stories, I see this common theme. Everything from your daughter to your story about your wife earlier to even your coaching, like when you're coaching executives, right? It all stems with like what's not being said. And it kind of goes into what we were talking about, the dark side that you're talking about too. And there's so much on that dark side that, we don't want to talk about. And what's really beautiful is like the common theme I see in all your stories is like, if we do this work, it's really inspiring to see what's possible on the other side. And throughout all your stories, I've just been so captivated and amazed by that. And I think sometimes when we are doing the shadow work or the dark work, it's hard to kind of see the long term of this, this growth, right? Because you're in the thick of it. You the fog of war sometimes or whatever, right? You can't see the outcome. And just listening to this podcast is very, very inspiring for me and probably a lot of our listeners. So I just want to say, Dan, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for coming on to a podcast and sharing all your experiences. You are definitely also, fun fact, I think you are you take the cake for the coach with the most experience on this podcast too. So congratulations there, man.
Bless you, man. Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, man.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.